Hello everyone, it's Dr. Phil from PhysFarm Training Systems. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the new version of RaceDay, version 2.0, also known as Apollo. It's got some pretty cool new enhancements that we think you're going to dig, so let's get right down to it. Just in terms of the layout of the screen here, you can see that it's a little bit different than you remember. On the left side of the screen, we now list all of the athletes' names, so you can click through different athletes in the database very easily and compare data between athletes. Down here on the bottom left, you can see that we have another window that gives you the vital statistics of the currently selected athlete. So for instance, this athlete weighs 54 kilos, this is how tall they are, and shows you the thresholds in the different sports. So that's pretty cool. Now, you can see here in our main data view window that we have a tab-driven system. So you can now basically click between different sports or look at all sports at once. So for instance, here in the All tab, we can look at overall fitness or positive training effect, fatigue or negative training effects, and performance, or basically what the ability of the athlete to perform in any given day is. Now this graph is obviously a composite of swimming, cycling, running, strength training, and everything else. You can also see we have an effect curve now, and this is also a composite graph. So at any given time, we can decide how the build and taper ought to look for swimming, cycling, running, etc. And this is really unique to RaceDay. There's no other product on the market that has this sort of functionality, and it's really customized to each specific athlete. The program decides on what the optimal strategy for that athlete is in the mathematical sense and shows it to you, so you can plan very nicely. And finally, down here we have a new training graph, and the essential function of this graph is to show you the total training stress on any given day. So we can double click and zoom in. We can see here that it shows you on any given day how many points came from swimming versus cycling versus running. So you can compare between sports day by day pretty easily. The other cool thing is the distribution graph. You're now able to look at a comparison between sports and zones. So for instance, you can have a look at how much threshold work you've done in each of the 3 sports at any given time. So that's pretty cool as well. If we click back out, we can now take a look at some of the other sports. So for instance, let's click over to the cycling tab, and you can see again, this is what you remember from the first version of RaceDay. We have sport-specific graphs now that show us how our fitness in cycling is, how our performance status is in cycling, how our fatigue is in cycling, sport-specific effect curves, predicted wattage. So this is very helpful. And of course, as always, you can zoom right in by clicking. You can look at predictions for any given day just by floating your cursor over different parts of the curve. Of course, we still have the training graph that shows us basic statistics such as distance and time. But it also shows you training stress in the specific sport, as well as the intensity of the workout, and as well as average and normalized metrics, so you can determine just how you're improving over time. And finally, of course, we have the records graph, and you'll remember this. We'll just refresh the graph real quick, because we can look at maximal power curves or maximal pace curves over any given time frame we'd like to look at. So that's very helpful as well. And finally, we have sport-specific distribution graphs. So you can look at each different sport and how much time you spent in each zone. So that can be very helpful as well in certain situations. Now, you can also see we have these other buttons. So let's click over to this calendar function. And this is really kind of a nice thing, because now we can both schedule and record training on any given day. So for instance, you can see here that for this Saturday there was a bike workout scheduled. You can see the time and how many points we wanted to do. And you can also see the workout itself. There's lots of ways you can enter this. You can cut and paste from another program. You can import from your own personal library. You can export to your own personal library. So you can develop a whole catalog of workouts that you can then use later on to build your schedule, etc. If you also take a look here, there's ways for the athlete and coach to make notes on the training. So that can be very helpful as well and enhance that training or enhance communication between the athlete and the coach. Now you can also see here we have a log button. What the log button allows you to do is get right in there and take a look at take a look at the training files themselves. So for instance, here for the cycling workout, we'll click on the button. And what we're going to get is a graphing window, or well, first we're going to get a summary window where you can see here that you have distance and averages and things like that. But then you can click on the graphing button and get a look at the workout itself. And you'll notice this is very different than what used to be in RaceDay. There's a whole new graphing engine. It applies to all the graphs, not just this one. but this is the one where you can see sort of the most functionality easily. So we'll talk about this. You can see right now that there's one lap defined and it's for the entire workout. But let's say you wanted to compare these two intervals. You would just click the zoom in button, select it, it zooms in for you. The window down here shows you the statistics for this particular lap, and then you can create it. There's lap 1. So now you've got one defined, but maybe you'd like to define another lap. So okay, let's compare it to this interval. Same thing, we're zoomed in, make another lap, and we can also label these laps whatever we like. So let's say we want to call this one interval 1, and this one interval 2, or whatever you like. Now we can easily compare between them. We can see that this lap, the average was 229 watts. This lap, the average was 225 watts. You get the general idea here. So this is very helpful. Now let's say you've decided that one of these efforts is really spectacular effort and you'd like to use that as a performance test for race day so that it can try and figure out the way your fitness and fatigue and your performance status are moving over time. You can simply go over here and click copy to test. It's loaded into the modeling engine and can help race day predict your future performance. So that's very helpful. So let's get out of here and talk about the other cool things we can do with the scheduling functions. You can see here there are these long bars that are in here. This one, for instance, says racing, maintain load, and prepare for taper. Kind of the cool thing about this is that you can now define your periodization within race day. You can define, for each different sport, in fact, different ranges of dates and what you want to be working on. So for instance, here we're talking about racing. Down here, we can see that the athlete may have had an injury because date ranges were defined that say recuperation, rest knee, recuperation, rest shoulder. So it's very nice to be able to do this for the athlete and coach because you can now go ahead and have a look and see exactly what's going on and exactly what you want to be going on at any given time. Last thing about this window I'll tell you is that we now have summary functionality. So we can look at, for instance, distance, time, and total score for the week for all the different sports. All of this stuff in terms of scheduling your events in the calendar or fixing your periodization is all driven from the planning tab, and that really just allows you to very nicely select date ranges and plug these kind of things in. It's all very intuitive. RaceDay has a lot of other new features as well, including athlete profiling. You can set up historical profiles for different date ranges for the athlete and see how their training zones change from time to time, or watch how their threshold power or pace advance from time to time. So all these things really give you a whole new level with which you can work with the athlete. Now the last feature, one that we're very excited about, is server functionality. Basically what we can do now is allow RaceDay to connect to a central server. So let's say you have a coach that has RaceDay, you have RaceDay, you two want to be able to communicate. Both of them will connect to a central server to communicate your data so that when your coach wants to write you a new schedule, it'll be communicated across the server and immediately appear on in your calendar in RaceDay. Likewise, when you load a new file in, it will instantly be communicated across the server and end up on your coach's RaceDay. This doesn't require you to log into any third-party websites, in fact, if your coach installs it on their own machine, there's no subscription fees involved. So it's really a whole new level of planning between athlete and coach and really streamlines communication. So that's the new RaceDay in a nutshell. If you have any questions, you know where to find me over at PhysFarm.com. We're very excited about the new version. We hope you are too. It'll be available on the 1st of January. And until then, we'll see you at the races.